I'm Hazel Montgomery, 25 today, and my father just handed me disownment papers wrapped in birthday paper. The silence around our mahogany dining table is deafening as everyone stares. My mother's eyes are fixed on her plate. My brother Alex smirks. Dad stands tall, his voice ice cold. You've brought nothing but shame to the Montgomery name with these childish dreams. Either join the company or you're cut off completely. My hands tremble as my entire world collapses in an instant. Before I dive into how my life imploded and then transformed, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between family expectations and your true self. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how a manila envelope of rejection led to the most unexpected victory of my life. Growing up in the Montgomery household in Beacon Hill, Boston meant living in a mansion where appearances always mattered more than feelings. My father, Richard Montgomery, wasn't just the CEO of Montgomery Investments. He was a dictator who ran our family like one of his corporate acquisitions. Cold, calculating, and obsessed with status, he measured everyone's worth by their contribution to the family legacy. My mother, Judith, was the perfect corporate wife, always immaculately dressed, hosting flawless dinner parties, and never contradicting my father in public. Behind closed doors, she occasionally whispered words of comfort when Dad's criticism became too harsh, but those moments of sympathy evaporated the moment he entered the room. Her loyalty was never truly to her children, but to the Montgomery name and the lifestyle it provided. Then there was my brother Alex, 3 years older, and father's perfect protege. He followed Dad into Harvard Business School, then straight into Montgomery Investments, where he quickly became Dad's right-hand man. Alex absorbed all our father's worst traits: the ruthless ambition, the emotional detachment, the belief that people were either assets or liabilities. He married Rebecca, a woman from another wealthy family, creating the perfect Montgomery merger that delighted our father. Rebecca always fascinated me because I occasionally caught glimpses of genuine emotion beneath her polished exterior. Sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, I'd catch her staring at my sketchbooks with something like longing in her eyes. But whatever dreams she might have had were sacrificed at the altar of Montgomery approval. She became Alex's echo, praising his every decision while shooting me pitying glances when she thought I wasn't looking. And then there was me, the disappointment. Instead of pursuing finance or law like a proper Montgomery, I fell in love with art and design. My earliest memory is of Dad finding my drawings and tearing them up, explaining that Montgomerys don't waste time on frivolities. I learned to hide my sketchbooks after that, drawing in secret and developing my passion in the shadows of my father's disapproval. When I announced after college that I wanted to pursue graphic design instead of joining the family business, the real trouble began. Dad's disappointment curdled into something darker: active sabotage. He would arrange interviews with financial firms and then act betrayed when I declined their offers. Every family dinner became a tribunal where my life choices were dissected and found wanting. "When will you grow up and accept your responsibilities?" became his constant refrain. I moved into a modest apartment in Somerville, determined to make it on my own without the Montgomery fortune. I started building a portfolio and picking up freelance design jobs, each small success feeling like a personal victory. But living in Boston meant I couldn't entirely escape my family's shadow. The city's financial world was my father's kingdom, and the Montgomery name opened doors I hadn't asked to be opened, and slammed others shut when I refused to walk through them. The tension had been building for years, but it escalated dramatically as my 25th birthday approached. In the Montgomery family, 25 wasn't just another year. It marked the age when we officially received our trust funds and were expected to take our designated places in the family business. My grandmother had established these trusts, and in her traditional worldview, 25 marked full adulthood and responsibility. 2 weeks before my birthday, Dad summoned me to his office downtown. The Montgomery Investment Building dominated the Boston skyline, a glass and steel monument to my father's ego. "This rebellious phase ends now," he informed me, not even bothering with a greeting. You have 2 weeks to accept the position we've created for you in investor relations. Your trust fund will be released on your birthday, contingent upon your employment here. I don't want the money if it comes with those strings, I replied, heart pounding but voice steady. His eyes narrowed. Then you want nothing from this family at all? I should have recognized the threat in his words, the calculation behind them. Instead, I simply said, I want to be respected for who I am, not who you want me to be. He dismissed me with a wave, and I left thinking I'd stood my ground. I didn't realize I'd just given him exactly the opening he needed to deliver the cruelest birthday gift imaginable. The morning after my birthday disaster, I woke up on my couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes, eyes swollen from crying all night. The disownment papers lay scattered across my coffee table, where I'd thrown them in anger before collapsing into tears. Legal jargon blurred together, but the essence was clear. I was no longer a Montgomery. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family connection. 25 years erased with a signature. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with text messages and missed calls. Most were from my best friend Brooke, increasingly concerned as I hadn't answered. A few were from extended family members. My cousin Paige expressing shock. My Aunt Linda asking if I was okay. Nothing from my immediate family except a text from Alex. Dad's giving you one more chance. Don't be stupid. A knock at my door startled me. When I opened it, Brooke pushed past me with coffee and pastries. You look like hell, she said bluntly, taking in my smeared makeup and rumpled clothes. I've been texting you all night. My father disowned me, I said, the words sounding unreal even as I spoke them. At my birthday dinner, in front of everyone. Brooke set down the coffee and pulled me into a hug. Tell me everything. As I recounted the previous evening's humiliation, Brooke's expression shifted from sympathy to outrage. That's why I loved her. Unlike the calculating people I'd grown up with, Brooke's emotions were always transparent and genuine. Your father is a monster, she concluded when I finished. But you're better off without someone who would do that to their own daughter. Her words were still hanging in the air when another knock came at my door. This time it was Alex, immaculate in his tailored suit despite the early hour. Can we talk? He asked, not waiting for an answer before walking in. He nodded curtly at Brooke, who glared back. I'll wait in the bedroom, Brooke told me, squeezing my arm before leaving us alone. Alex surveyed my apartment with the same distaste he always showed, as though my modest furnishings were personally offensive. You need to fix this, he said without preamble. Dad's actually serious this time, Hazel. The paperwork is real. I gathered that from the notary he brought along, I replied. Alex sighed with exaggerated patience. This isn't a joke. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Not just money, but connections, opportunities, security. For what? Drawing pictures? Graphic design is a legitimate career, Alex. Not for a Montgomery, it isn't. He lowered his voice, attempting sincerity. Look, just apologize. Tell Dad you've reconsidered. The position is still open. He'll tear up the papers, and this will all blow over. I almost laughed. Blow over? He humiliated me in front of our entire family. He's been undermining me for years. Why would I ever want to work for someone like that? Because he's our father and he knows what's best, Alex said, as though reciting a familiar scripture. Grow up, Hazel. The real world isn't about following your passion. It's about responsibility. Get out, I told him quietly. He shook his head. You'll regret this, he warned before letting himself out. I collapsed onto the couch, only to be jolted by my phone ringing. It was my bank. My account had been frozen. The account my father had helped me set up as a teenager. The bank representative explained there was a dispute over the account ownership, and until it was resolved, I couldn't access my savings. The hits kept coming. My landlord called next. Apparently, my father had been co-signing my lease without my knowledge. A fact I learned only when the landlord informed me that the co-signer had withdrawn, and I had 30 days to either find a new guarantor or vacate. By afternoon, the scope of my father's vengeance became clear. A pending design contract was suddenly canceled, the client awkwardly explaining they'd received concerning information about my reliability. 3 other potential clients stopped responding to my emails entirely. The final blow came when my college friend Taylor, now working at a major design firm, called to warn me that my father was actively contacting people in the industry, spreading rumors that I was unstable and unprofessional. He was systematically destroying not just my family connections, but my professional reputation as well. "He can't get away with this," Brooke insisted, when she returned to find me shell-shocked on the couch. But he could, and he was. Richard Montgomery had spent decades cultivating power and influence precisely for moments like this, when someone defied him and needed to be taught a lesson. I was experiencing firsthand what happened to people who crossed my father. As darkness fell on that terrible day, I made a decision. I wouldn't crawl back to him. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Whatever it took, I would rebuild my life without the Montgomery name. If he wanted to disown me, I would show him exactly what he was losing. 3 days after the disownment, I reached out to my mother. We'd always had a complicated relationship. Her loyalty to my father consistently trumped any maternal instinct, but I desperately needed an ally within the family. Someone who might help father see reason, or at least someone who could help me understand why he'd gone to such extreme measures. We arranged to meet at Café Lucia, a small place in Cambridge far from my father's usual haunts. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. My mother's normally perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, her eyes darting nervously around the cafe, as though expecting my father to materialize at any moment. "I can only stay for 30 minutes, she said, settling across from me. "Your father thinks I'm at a spa appointment." The subterfuge gave me hope. If she was hiding this meeting from him, perhaps she was finally ready to stand up for me. "Mom, I don't understand how Dad could do this," I began, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I know he's disappointed in my career choice, but disowning me? Freezing my accounts? Getting me evicted?" She fidgeted with her wedding ring. 4 carats of flawless diamond that my father upgraded every decade of their marriage. "Your father feels betrayed, Hazel. The Montgomery name means everything to him. More than his own daughter?" Her silence was answer enough. "I just want to live my own life," I continued. "I never asked for his money. I just wanted his support, or at least for him to stop actively sabotaging me." Something shifted in my mother's expression. "Perhaps we can find a compromise," she said carefully. "Richard is stubborn, but he's not unreasonable." My heart lifted. "You'll talk to him? I can try." She reached across the table, something she rarely did, and squeezed my hand. "Send me your portfolio. If your work is truly good, perhaps I can convince him there's merit in your hobby." I winced at her choice of words but grabbed the lifeline. "It's not a hobby, Mom, but yes, I'll send everything tonight." "Give me a week," she said, standing up as her 30 minutes expired. "Don't contact your father directly. Let me handle this." For the first time since my birthday, I felt a flicker of hope. I spent the next 3 days polishing my portfolio, selecting my strongest work, adding detailed explanations of each project's success. I poured everything into it, not just my skill, but my heart. This wasn't just about getting my father to accept my career choice anymore. It was about proving my worth in the only terms he might understand: results and recognition. I sent it to my mother with a note thanking her for interceding. Then I waited. 5 days later, I received a rejection email from Patterson and Walsh, a design agency where I'd applied months ago. Nothing unusual about rejection in my field, except this one mentioned specific projects from my portfolio, projects I'd only shared with my mother days before. Confused, I called the hiring manager, who reluctantly admitted they'd received feedback about me from Montgomery Investments, along with samples of my work sent directly from my father's office. The realization hit like a physical blow. My mother hadn't been helping me at all. She'd been gathering ammunition for my father. The portfolio I'd so carefully prepared had been handed directly to him, who then used it to further blacklist me with design agencies. Still reeling, I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice clipped and formal. I know what you did, I said, not bothering with pleasantries. You gave Dad my portfolio. A pause. It's for the best, Hazel. For whose best? Not mine. This family has a legacy to protect, she replied, her voice hardening into something unrecognizable. Your father and I agreed you needed a reality check. Sometimes children need to learn the hard way. I'm 25, not 5, and you lied to me. You pretended to help while stabbing me in the back. Another pause, longer this time. I've always been clear about where my loyalties lie. This rebellion of yours was charming when you were younger, but it's time to grow up. I laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is? I actually thought for once you might choose me over him. Stupid of me, wasn't it? Hazel, was the disownment your idea too? I asked suddenly. Did you help him plan it? Is that why you made sure all the relatives were there? To maximize my humiliation? Her silence confirmed everything. How long have you known he was planning this? I pressed. Since February, she admitted quietly. We've been monitoring your accounts, your job applications, waiting to see if you'd come to your senses naturally. 3 months. They'd been planning this for 3 months, watching me struggle, letting me believe I was making progress, while laying the groundwork to destroy everything I'd built. Don't contact me again, I told her, my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside. You're as dead to me as I apparently am to you. I hung up and collapsed onto my kitchen floor, a new wave of grief washing over me. Losing my father had been painful but somewhat expected given our years of conflict, but my mother's betrayal cut deeper. She'd been my last hope for maintaining any connection to my former life, and now that too was gone. That night, alone in my apartment that I'd soon be forced to leave, I hit rock bottom. Every foundation I thought I could rely on had crumbled. Family, financial security, even my professional reputation, all systematically destroyed by the people who should have supported me most. For the first time, I wondered if fighting was worth it. Maybe Alex was right. Maybe I should just surrender, apologize, take the corporate job, and live the life that had been planned for me since birth. The thought lasted exactly one night. By morning, something had hardened inside me, a determination that went beyond mere stubbornness. The Montgomerys had declared war on me, and I was finally ready to accept that there would be no peaceful resolution. If I was going to survive, I needed to fight back with everything I had. A week after my mother's betrayal, I was boxing up my apartment, preparing for inevitable eviction. My savings, what little I could access, wouldn't cover another place without a guarantor, and my freelance work had dried up completely thanks to my father's campaign against me. You're moving in with me, Brooke announced, showing up with more boxes and a determined expression that brooked no argument. My spare room is yours for as long as you need it. I can't ask you to do that, I protested weakly. You didn't ask. I'm telling. She grabbed a stack of design books and began packing them efficiently. Besides, my cousin Jessica is coming over tonight, and you need to meet her. I'm not really up for socializing, I admitted. Brooke fixed me with a stern look. Jessica works at Nexus Innovations in their marketing department. They're looking for designers. My heart sank. Brooke, I appreciate it, but my father doesn't know Jessica or her boss. And Nexus is one of the few tech companies in Boston that isn't connected to Montgomery Investments. She smiled slyly. I've been doing my homework. That evening, I met Jessica at Brooke's apartment over takeout and wine. She was sharp, funny, and refreshingly direct. So you're the disowned heiress, she said, studying me over her glass of Cabernet. Brooke says you're talented. I used to think so, I admitted. Now I'm not sure anyone will give me the chance to prove it. Jessica pulled out her tablet. Show me your work. For the next hour, I walked her through my portfolio, the same one my mother had betrayed me with. Jessica asked intelligent questions, occasionally making notes. When we finished, she leaned back thoughtfully. Our creative director is looking for fresh perspectives, she said finally. I can get you an interview, but I'll need to keep your last name quiet. Our founder, Kyle Peterson, occasionally runs in the same circles as some of the investment firms. I understand, I said, hope flickering to life, despite my best efforts to suppress it. I'm grateful for any opportunity. Don't thank me yet, Jessica warned. The interview will be tough, and I'm putting my reputation on the line. Don't make me regret it. 3 days later, I found myself in the sleek offices of Nexus Innovations, waiting to interview for a junior designer position. I'd spent every waking hour preparing, researching the company, and updating my portfolio with specific examples that would appeal to their aesthetic. Brooke had lent me her most professional outfit, and I'd rehearsed answers to potential questions until I could recite them in my sleep. None of it prepared me for the actual interview, which was the most challenging of my career. The creative director, Aidan, was brilliant but exacting, pushing me to defend every design choice and explain my creative process in meticulous detail. By the time we finished, I was mentally exhausted but strangely exhilarated. Whether I got the job or not, I'd been evaluated on my actual merits for once, not my family name. "One more person wants to meet you," Aidan said, leading me to a corner office with glass walls. The man who stood to greet us looked to be in his early 40s, with kind eyes that contrasted with his no-nonsense demeanor. Kyle Peterson, he introduced himself, founder and CEO. There was something vaguely familiar about him that I couldn't place. We shook hands, and he gestured for me to sit. "Aidan speaks highly of your portfolio," Kyle said, studying me curiously. "But I'm interested in knowing why someone with your obvious talent hasn't been snatched up by one of the larger agencies." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I've faced some industry politics recently." Kyle nodded slowly. "Jessica mentioned you'd prefer we not use your last name during the hiring process. May I ask why?" The moment of truth. I could lie, but something told me honesty was my only option with this man. "My name is Hazel Montgomery," I admitted. "My father is Richard Montgomery of Montgomery Investments. We've had a falling out, and he's been using his influence to make it difficult for me to find work in my field." Recognition flickered across Kyle's face, followed by something harder to read. "I see," he said simply. "And you believe your work should stand on its own merit." "Yes, it's all I'm asking for, a fair chance." Kyle was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. "I believe everyone deserves that much. We'd like to offer you a position as a junior designer, 3-month probationary period, standard benefits package. You'd report directly to Aidan." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "You're offering me the job? Just like that?" "Just like that," Kyle confirmed. "Though I should warn you, the fact that we're not connected to Montgomery Investments isn't an accident. Your father and I have history. If he discovers you're working here, things could get complicated." A warning bell sounded in my mind, but I was too grateful for the opportunity to heed it. "I understand. And thank you, I won't let you down." That night, I moved my remaining belongings into Brooke's spare room, my mind spinning with this unexpected turn of events. For the first time since my birthday disaster, I felt something like hope. Nexus would give me the chance to prove myself on my own terms, away from my father's shadow. If I succeeded there, I could begin rebuilding my portfolio, my reputation, and eventually my life. Little did I know that my father's shadow was longer than I imagined, and that Kyle Peterson's history with him would prove to be the key to everything that followed. 3 months at Nexus Innovations transformed my life. For the first time, I was judged solely on the quality of my work, not my family connections. Aidan pushed me hard but recognized my talent, giving me increasingly significant projects as I proved myself. My colleagues became friends, particularly Mia from the UX team and Dominic from marketing, who invited me to lunch meetings and after-work gatherings without knowing or caring about my infamous last name. I excelled in ways I never had before, my confidence growing with each successful project. Kyle Peterson occasionally stopped by our department, always taking time to check on my progress and offer encouragement. There was still something familiar about him that I couldn't quite place, but his kindness was a balm after years of my father's coldness. The probationary period ended with a team celebration and a permanent job offer. I felt like I'd finally found my place in the world, a feeling that lasted exactly 2 days before the first sign of trouble appeared. It began with an anonymous email to HR questioning my qualifications and suggesting I'd misrepresented my experience. Fortunately, Aiden immediately defended me, pointing to my consistently excellent work over the past 3 months. The accusation was dismissed, but it left me uneasy. My unease turned to dread a week later when I spotted a familiar face in the Nexus lobby, my brother Alex, shaking hands with Kyle as they emerged from a meeting. I ducked behind a column, heart racing, but not before Alex's eyes flickered in my direction with a flash of recognition. That evening, I confronted him outside his office building. "What were you doing at Nexus?" I demanded, blocking his path to his car. Alex's smile was all Montgomery, calculating and cold. "Business, little sister. The world doesn't revolve around you. Did Dad send you? Is he trying to get me fired? Paranoid much?" Alex laughed, but his eyes remained serious, though Dad was quite interested to hear where you've been hiding. "Kyle Peterson, huh? Interesting choice." My stomach dropped. "Leave me alone, Alex. I'm not hurting anyone by trying to build my own career." "That's where you're wrong," he replied, his voice hardening. "Your defiance hurts the family. Your absence at corporate events raises questions. Your rejection of everything we stand for undermines Dad's authority. So what? He disowned me, remember? He gave you a choice, and you chose poorly." Alex straightened his already perfect tie. "Dad sent me to warn Peterson about you. Professionally, of course. Just some friendly context about your history of instability." I nearly lunged at him then, furious beyond words. But he smoothly stepped around me. "It's not personal, Hazel," he called over his shoulder. "It's just business." The next morning, I went straight to Kyle's office, prepared to resign before I could be fired. To my shock, he waved away my concerns. "Your brother paid me a visit, yes," Kyle acknowledged. "Quite the performance about his concern for your well-being, while simultaneously suggesting you were unreliable." "I'm so sorry," I began, but Kyle cut me off. "I judge people by their actions, Hazel, not by rumors, especially rumors from Montgomery Investments." Something dark flickered across his face. "Your position here is secure, based on your work, which has been exemplary. That's all that matters to me." Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. My father, thwarted in his first attempt, escalated his campaign against me. A private investigator began following me, not even bothering to be subtle about it. I spotted him outside Brooke's apartment, then again near the Nexus offices. When Dominic and I grabbed lunch, the PI took photos from a nearby table, later sending them to my mother with implications that I was romantically involved with a coworker, a transparent attempt to create workplace drama. Then came the financial attack. My father attempted to buy shares in Nexus, clearly hoping to gain enough influence to force Kyle's hand regarding my employment. Luckily, Nexus was privately held and not easily accessible to outside investors, but the attempt showed how far my father was willing to go. The final blow came when I checked the status of my trust fund, not because I expected access to it after the disownment, but because I wanted to understand exactly what I'd lost. What I discovered was worse than I imagined. The trust fund my grandmother had established for me had been completely drained months before my birthday, with large transfers to offshore accounts. My father hadn't just denied me future access, he'd systematically emptied it in preparation for cutting me off. As if this weren't enough, Rebecca called to warn me that my father was spreading rumors throughout Boston's social circles that I suffered from mental health issues and had been in and out of treatment facilities, a complete fabrication designed to isolate me further from potential allies. "He's determined to bring you back under control," Rebecca told me, her voice a mixture of fascination and fear. "I've never seen him so fixated on anything." "Why?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "Why not just let me go? He's the one who disowned me." "Because you're the first person who's ever walked away from him," she replied simply. "And Richard Montgomery can't allow anyone to reject him, especially not his own daughter." I hung up feeling hunted. My father's vindictiveness seemed to know no bounds, and I began to wonder how long Nexus would continue protecting me from his influence. Every day I expected to be called into HR and let go. Every project I feared would be my last. The constant stress began affecting my sleep, my appetite, my creativity, exactly what my father wanted. But I refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking me. Each morning I showed up at Nexus determined to prove my worth, to create work so exceptional that no amount of paternal sabotage could undermine it. My father might have taken my inheritance, my security, and attempted to destroy my reputation, but he couldn't take my talent or my determination unless I surrendered them willingly. And surrender was the one thing I would never do. 6 months into my time at Nexus, Aiden assigned me my first major client presentation, a complete rebranding for Horizon Financial, a regional bank looking to modernize its image. This wasn't just a test of my design skills, but of my ability to communicate vision to clients, to defend creative choices, and to represent Nexus professionally. It was exactly the opportunity I needed to cement my position at the company. I threw myself into the project, working evenings and weekends, refining every detail until the presentation was flawless. 2 days before the big meeting, as I was reviewing the final slides in my tiny office, my phone lit up with a message from a surprising source. "Rebecca, can we talk? In person. It's important." My first instinct was to ignore it. Rebecca had never been an ally, always choosing Alex and my father's side in family disputes. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet her for coffee the following morning. She arrived at the cafe looking uncharacteristically disheveled, her usual perfect appearance slightly frayed at the edges. Without preamble, she slid into the seat across from me. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "Watching what they're doing to you, it's wrong." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Why the sudden attack of conscience? "It's not sudden." She fidgeted with her wedding ring, a Montgomery family heirloom that had once belonged to my grandmother. "I've been questioning things for a while, the way your father operates, the way Alex is becoming just like him." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "The way I've betrayed my own principles to fit into their world." Something in her expression seemed genuinely troubled. Still, I remained wary. "What exactly do you want, Rebecca?" "To help you." She leaned forward. "Your father is planning something. I overheard him and Alex talking, something about ensuring you face consequences for your continued defiance." My stomach tightened. "What kind of consequences?" "I don't know details, but it involves Nexus and your presentation this week. Alex has been making calls, gathering information about your project." I thought of all the work I'd put into the Horizon presentation, how much was riding on its success. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's gone too far," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "This vendetta against you, it's not business anymore, it's cruelty, and I can't be part of it." Against my better judgment, I felt myself softening toward her. Rebecca had always been caught between worlds, raised in privilege like me, but having chosen the path of conformity, I'd rejected. "What can I do?" I asked. "The presentation is happening, and I can't exactly accuse my father of sabotage without proof. Be prepared for anything," she advised. "And maybe," she hesitated, "maybe let me see what you're presenting? I might spot whatever vulnerability they're planning to exploit." Warning bells sounded in my mind, but I silenced them. If Rebecca was finally standing up to the Montgomery machine, I didn't want to discourage her. Besides, the presentation wasn't confidential. The entire creative team had access to it. "I have it on my laptop," I said, pulling out my computer. "Just don't share it, obviously." Rebecca spent 30 minutes reviewing my slides, asking questions about the strategy behind certain choices, seeming genuinely impressed with the work. When she left, she hugged me, something she'd never done before, and whispered, "Be careful, Hazel. They're more dangerous than you know." The day of the presentation arrived, and I felt as prepared as possible. The Horizon executives filed into the Nexus conference room, followed by Aiden, Kyle, and the rest of our team. I connected my laptop to the projector, took a deep breath, and began. The first 3 slides went perfectly. Then I clicked to the 4th slide, a key breakdown of Horizon's current brand perception data, and froze. The numbers were wrong, completely, catastrophically wrong. Instead of showing Horizon's growing market share, the altered data suggested their brand was in freefall. The Horizon CEO frowned. That doesn't match the reports we provided. I quickly clicked forward, hoping it was an isolated error, but each subsequent slide contained subtle but devastating alterations. Customer feedback quotes had been changed, demographic data shifted, competitive analysis corrupted. The entire presentation had been sabotaged, with changes sophisticated enough that I hadn't noticed them during my final review. I don't understand, I stammered, frantically scrolling through the wreckage of my work. This isn't what I prepared. Aiden stepped in, smoothly suggesting a short break while we sorted out the technical difficulties. As the client stepped out, his professional demeanor dropped. "What happened?" he demanded. "I don't know," I insisted, panic rising in my throat. "Someone must have altered my files." Kyle's expression was grave. "When was the last time you checked the presentation?" "Last night, and everything was fine then." The IT security team was called in, and within an hour they had traced the source of the alterations. My computer, accessed remotely through malware that had been installed during a recent coffee shop visit. The malware's signature matched one used in previous corporate espionage cases. This was professional, the IT director confirmed. Targeted and sophisticated. Kyle believed me, as did Aiden, but the damage was done. The Horizon team left without signing the contract, unconvinced by our hurried explanations and promises to deliver corrected materials. Nexus had lost a major potential client, and I was the face of the failure. That evening, as I sat despondent in my office, contemplating the likely end of my career at Nexus, my phone chimed with a text from Rebecca. "Sorry it had to be this way. You should have known better than to trust any of us." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Rebecca's sympathy, her apparent crisis of conscience, all an act to gain access to my computer. The coffee shop visit where she'd accidentally spilled her drink, necessitating that I leave my laptop unattended for a few minutes while helping her clean up. The malware must have been installed then, giving her remote access to alter my files just hours before the presentation. My phone rang. Brooke, checking to see if I was okay after the disaster she'd heard about from Jessica. Through tears, I explained what had happened. Rebecca's betrayal, my father's apparent determination to destroy any chance of independence I might find. "This ends now," Brooke said, her voice hard with anger. "If your father wants to play dirty, it's time you learned what he's really afraid of." "What do you mean?" "Jessica's been doing some digging," she replied. "About Kyle Peterson and your father's history. There's something there, Hazel. Something big enough that your father might be targeting Nexus specifically because you work there." "Why would he care about Nexus?" "That's what we need to find out," Brooke said. "Because I'm willing to bet that whatever it is, it's the key to fighting back against your father once and for all." The morning after the presentation disaster, I expected to be fired. Instead, I found Kyle Peterson waiting in my office, a determined expression on his face. "We need to talk," he said simply, gesturing for me to close the door. I braced myself for the worst, but Kyle surprised me. "The sabotage yesterday wasn't your fault," he began. "Our security team confirmed the malware was professionally deployed. But it raises questions about why someone would go to such lengths to undermine a presentation to a regional bank." I hesitated, then decided. Complete honesty was my only option. It was my family. My sister-in-law Rebecca tricked me into giving her access to my laptop. She works for my father and brother. Kyle studied me intently. "And you believe your father orchestrated this specifically to harm you?" "Yes. He's been escalating his efforts to force me back under his control or destroy me professionally if I refuse." Instead of skepticism, Kyle's expression showed grim understanding. "I was afraid of this when I hired you, but I hoped Richard wouldn't go this far. Something in his tone made me ask, "How exactly do you know my father?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. "It's a complicated story, and one I should have shared with you sooner. My father, Edward Peterson, was your father's original business partner. They founded Montgomery and Peterson Investments together in the 1980 seconds. The name sparked a distant memory, photographs I'd seen in my grandmother's study, two young men shaking hands in front of a modest office building. The sign had been different then. "What happened?" I asked. "My father died when I was 14, Kyle said, his voice carefully neutral. "A boating accident. Very tragic, very sudden. Within 6 months, your father had changed the company name, bought out my mother's share for pennies on the dollar, and erased every trace of my father's contribution to building the firm." The implications were clear, but Kyle didn't elaborate further. Instead, he added, "I've spent 20 years building Nexus into a company that operates on different principles: integrity, collaboration, recognizing everyone's contribution. Everything Montgomery Investments is not. And my father knows this." "Oh yes," Kyle confirmed. "He knows exactly who I am and what Nexus represents, which is why your presence here might be particularly provoking to him." The pieces were falling into place. "So I'm not just a rebellious daughter to him. I'm working for someone he considers an enemy." "From Richard's perspective, yes." Kyle leaned forward. "Hazel, I want to be clear. I didn't hire you to get back at your father. I hired you because you're talented. But now that he's attacking my company to get to you, I need to know. Are you willing to help me understand exactly what we're dealing with?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." That afternoon, Jessica, Brooke, and I gathered in a conference room with Kyle. On the table between us lay printouts of old newspaper articles, corporate filings, and financial records. "We need to understand Richard Montgomery's playbook," Kyle explained. "Jessica has been researching your father's business history, looking for patterns." Jessica spread out several articles. "There's a pattern, all right. Your father has a history of using similar tactics against competitors and former associates." The evidence was damning. Case after case of character assassination, rumor spreading, and strategic sabotage against anyone who crossed Richard Montgomery. Former partners forced out, rivals undermined through whisper campaigns, whistleblowers discredited before they could speak out. "And there's this," Jessica added, pushing forward a yellowed newspaper clipping about Edward Peterson's death. The article mentioned an ongoing SEC investigation into Montgomery and Peterson Investments that was dropped after Edward's tragic accident. "You think my father was involved in your father's death?" I asked Kyle, horrified. "I've never been able to prove anything," he replied carefully. "But the timing was convenient for him. My father had discovered financial irregularities and wanted to report them. They argued about it the day before the accident. I felt sick. Could my father truly be capable of something so monstrous? The Richard Montgomery I knew was cold, controlling, vindictive. But murder? It seemed beyond even him. Yet the pattern of destroying anyone who threatened his control was undeniable." "There's something else," Brooke interjected. "Something more recent." She explained that she'd been helping me access my old email accounts, trying to recover professional contacts my father had tried to cut me off from. In the process, she discovered my mother had accidentally linked her personal email to my account years ago, giving me access to emails I was never meant to see. "Your mother isn't as tech-savvy as she thinks," Brooke explained, handing me a flash drive. "There are emails here between your parents discussing your father's current business dealings, including a major investment deal with foreign partners that Jessica thinks might involve some creative accounting." "The Lantham Group deal," Jessica confirmed. "It's been rumored in financial circles for months. Supposedly it's Richard's biggest coup in years, a partnership with Malaysian investors worth billions. But there are whispers that the numbers don't add up." "And you think my father might be doing something illegal?" I asked. "I think," Kyle said carefully, "that your father has spent decades believing he's untouchable. Men like that often get careless eventually." I stared at the flash drive in my hand. "So what do we do with this?" That's up to you, Kyle replied. This is your family we're talking about. I've spent years trying to build something to counter your father's influence, but I won't use you as a weapon against him unless that's what you truly want. The weight of the decision pressed down on me. If I used this information against my father, I would be crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But if I did nothing, he would continue his campaign to destroy me, and possibly harm Nexus and the people who had taken me in when I had nowhere else to go. I need time to think, I said finally. Kyle nodded. Take all the time you need. But remember, the Meridian Conference is in 2 months. Every major player in the industry will be there, including your father. If there was ever a moment to make a stand, that would be it. That night, I stayed late at the office, poring through the emails Brooke had recovered. Most were mundane, but several contained references to the Lantham deal that raised serious questions about its legitimacy. In one particularly damning exchange, my mother had expressed concern about potential regulatory issues, to which my father had replied, "Regulations are for people without friends in Washington." As the pieces came together, I faced the most difficult decision of my life. My father had disowned me, tried to destroy my career, and potentially committed serious financial crimes. Yet he was still my father, and exposing him would mean destroying not just him, but potentially my mother and brother as well. The question wasn't whether I could fight back against my father. It was whether I should, and at what cost. In the end, it came down to a simple truth. Richard Montgomery had made his choice when he handed me those disownment papers. He had decided that his control was more important than his daughter. Now I needed to decide what was more important to me, preserving the remnants of family loyalty or standing up for what was right. 2 days later, I walked into Kyle's office with my decision. I want to expose the truth, I told him. Not for revenge, but because it's the right thing to do. Kyle nodded solemnly. Then let's make sure we do it right. The Meridian Conference was the premier annual gathering for the financial technology sector, where innovation met investment in a flurry of presentations, networking events, and million-dollar deals. This year, it was being held at the Grand Harbor Hotel in downtown Boston, and both Montgomery Investments and Nexus Innovations had secured coveted presentation slots. In the 8 weeks leading up to the conference, I poured myself into preparing Nexus's presentation. After the disaster with Horizon Financial, I had something to prove, not just to the industry, but to myself. Kyle had taken a risk by putting me on the presentation team, and I was determined to vindicate his faith in me. Meanwhile, Jessica and a trusted team of Nexus analysts quietly investigated the documentation I'd provided about the Lantham deal. What they uncovered was more serious than we'd initially suspected. Evidence suggesting my father had misrepresented key financial details to investors, potentially violating SEC regulations. We need to be absolutely certain before we make any accusations, Kyle warned. Richard Montgomery has destroyed people for less. I understood the risk better than anyone. If we moved against my father without ironclad evidence, he would crush us. But if we were right, and could prove it, we might finally break his seemingly untouchable power. The day of the conference arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I'd spent the morning rehearsing our presentation with the team, reviewing every slide, practicing every transition. Nexus would be presenting our new financial security platform at 2 p.m., with Montgomery Investments scheduled immediately after to unveil their partnership with the Lantham Group. As I stepped into the Grand Harbor's soaring lobby, the familiar anxiety of entering my father's world washed over me. The conference was filled with his peers, his allies, people who would recognize the Montgomery name and wonder about the black sheep daughter who'd defied the great Richard Montgomery. I spotted him almost immediately, holding court near the registration desk, surrounded by admirers and sycophants. My brother Alex stood at his right hand, the perfect air in his bespoke suit and regimented smile. Neither of them had seen me yet. Jessica appeared at my elbow. "Ready for this?" I nodded, more confidently than I felt. Ready. Our presentation was scheduled in the main ballroom, which filled quickly with industry leaders, tech journalists, and potential investors. As I took my position at the side of the stage, waiting for our introduction, I caught sight of my father and brother entering the room, taking seats near the back where they could observe without being obvious. Kyle began the presentation with an overview of Nexus's vision, then introduced me to present our new security platform. As I took the podium, I felt my father's eyes boring into me, but I refused to look in his direction. This moment wasn't about him. It was about proving what I could accomplish on my own merits. For the next 20 minutes, I delivered the presentation of my life. The slides were flawless, the demonstrations compelling, the audience engaged. When I finished, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Several attendees approached the stage with questions, and I answered each one with confidence and clarity. As the room cleared for a brief break before the next presentation, I finally allowed myself to glance toward where my father had been sitting. He was gone, but Alex remained, his expression unreadable as our eyes met across the room. It was time for the Montgomery Investments presentation. I should have left, but something compelled me to stay, to witness whatever my father had planned. I took a seat at the back of the room as Richard Montgomery took the stage to thunderous applause. He was magnificent, I had to admit. At 62, he commanded attention with the same effortless authority he'd wielded throughout my childhood. His presentation of the Latham partnership was masterful, full of impressive projections and promises of revolutionary returns. Then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. After outlining the partnership's potential, he paused, scanning the room until his gaze found me. "I see my daughter is in attendance today," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the ballroom. "Hazel, why don't you stand up so everyone can see you?" 100 heads turned in my direction. I remained seated, heart pounding. "No?" "Well, I can understand your reluctance," he continued smoothly. "It must be difficult, knowing your amateur efforts with Nexus will be compared to what real professionals can accomplish." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My father was using his platform to publicly belittle me, knowing I had no way to respond. "For those who saw the earlier presentation," he went on, "I feel I should clarify something. The security platform they demonstrated, a pale imitation of technology my team developed years ago. Apparently, when talent isn't innate, it must be borrowed." He was accusing Nexus, accusing me, of stealing Montgomery intellectual property. The accusation was absurd, but in this room full of my father's peers and admirers, who would doubt Richard Montgomery? I felt the room closing in around me, the familiar sensation of being crushed under my father's thumb. Then, unexpectedly, Kyle Peterson stood up from his seat near the front. "That's a serious accusation, Richard," he said, his voice calm but carrying, especially coming from someone whose business practices are currently under regulatory review. A shocked silence fell over the room. My father's smile hardened into something dangerous. "I don't know what you're implying, Peterson, but be very careful." "I'm not implying anything," Kyle replied, walking toward the stage. "I'm stating facts. The Latham Group partnership you're so proudly presenting? The SEC might be interested in comparing the numbers you've shown today with the very different ones you've provided to your private investors." My father's face flushed with anger. "How dare you?" "We have the documentation, Richard," Kyle continued inexorably. "Emails, financial statements, recordings of meetings, all showing systematic misrepresentation of material facts." The room had gone completely silent now, every eye riveted on the confrontation unfolding before them. My father looked from Kyle to me, realization dawning in his eyes. "You," he said softly, "you did this." For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in my father's expression. He had always been so convinced of his own invulnerability that he'd never considered his discarded daughter might become a genuine threat. Before he could recover, Kyle delivered the final blow. "I'd like to make an announcement," he said, addressing the stunned audience. "Effective immediately, Hazel Montgomery is being promoted to Creative Director at Nexus Innovations, overseeing all our branding and user experience design." The The crowd broke into surprised applause, industry leaders looking at me with new respect. My father stood frozen on stage, watching as his attempt to humiliate me transformed into my moment of triumph. As the presentation dissolved into chaos, with journalists rushing to ask questions and attendees buzzing with gossip, I slipped out to the hallway, needing a moment alone to process what had just happened. I hadn't gotten far when a hand grabbed my arm. I turned to find Alex, his perfect composure finally cracking. "What have you done?" he hissed. "Do you have any idea what this will do to the company? To our family?" "You mean the family that disowned me?" I replied, pulling my arm free. "The family that tried to destroy my career? That family?" "It was never supposed to go this far," Alex said, running a hand through his usually immaculate hair. "Dad just wanted to scare you into coming back. He didn't expect you'd actually manage to stand on your own." "Or that I'd fight back?" I suggested. Alex looked at me as though seeing me clearly for the first time. "He's been getting calls all afternoon. Partners pulling out of deals, the SEC requesting meetings. It's all falling apart, Hazel." I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt a strange emptiness. "I didn't want this, Alex. I just wanted to live my own life." "Well, congratulations," he said bitterly. "You've got your freedom, and you've only had to destroy everything our father built to get it." As he walked away, I wondered if he was right. Had my fight for independence gone too far? Had I become so focused on proving myself that I'd lost sight of the collateral damage? But then I remembered the disownment papers, the frozen accounts, the sabotaged presentation, the years of conditional love and emotional manipulation. My father had made his choices, and now he would face the consequences, not because I sought revenge, but because the truth had finally caught up with him. I straightened my shoulders and walked back into the conference, ready to accept my new role and the future I'd fought so hard to claim. 1 year after the Meridian Conference, I sat in my corner office at Nexus Innovations, reviewing design proposals from my team. The wall behind my desk displayed awards our department had won under my leadership, including a prestigious industry recognition for the security platform interface we'd unveiled at last year's conference. The scandal surrounding my father's business practices had unfolded just as Kyle predicted. The SEC investigation led to charges of securities fraud and misrepresentation to investors. Montgomery Investments hadn't collapsed entirely, but its reputation was severely damaged, and many of its most lucrative partnerships had dissolved. My father himself had stepped down as CEO under pressure from the board, though he maintained his ownership stake. The great Richard Montgomery, once the untouchable king of Boston finance, was now a diminished figure, fighting legal battles and struggling to rebuild his shattered empire. I took no pleasure in his downfall. Despite everything, he was still my father, and watching his public humiliation brought me a complicated mixture of vindication and sadness. I had wanted freedom, not destruction. Independence, not revenge. But perhaps one wasn't possible without the other when dealing with a man like Richard Montgomery. My phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. "Your mother's calling me again. Says it's urgent." This had become a pattern over the past few months. As the Montgomery fortune dwindled and social invitations dried up, my mother had begun reaching out, first through intermediaries and then directly, seeking to reestablish contact. I had ignored her initial overtures, the wound of her betrayal still too fresh. But something had shifted inside me recently. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gradually being replaced by something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a desire for closure. "I'll meet her," I texted back, but not at their house. We arranged to meet at the public garden, on neutral ground. When I arrived, my mother was already there, sitting on a bench by the swan boats. She looked older than I remembered, the carefully maintained facade of the perfect Montgomery wife showing cracks around the edges. "Hazel," she said, standing as I approached. "Thank you for coming." We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke again. "Your father's legal team thinks they can settle the SEC charges, but the damage is substantial." "I didn't come to discuss Dad's legal problems," I said quietly. She nodded, twisting her wedding ring. Smaller now, I noticed, than the ostentatious diamond she'd worn during my childhood. No, of course not. I wanted to apologize. For my part in what happened. For not standing up for you when I should have. The apology seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled by her before. Why now, Mom? Because Dad's reputation is ruined? Because the country club crowd isn't inviting you to their parties anymore? That's not fair, she protested, but weakly. I've lost everything too, Hazel. You lost nothing you didn't choose to risk, I replied. You chose Dad over me every time. You helped him plan my humiliation. You betrayed my trust when I reached out to you. Tears filled her eyes. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I studied her, trying to see beyond the practiced grace and social poise to the woman underneath, my mother, who had always been something of a mystery to me. What do you want from me? I asked finally. Forgiveness, she whispered. A chance to be part of your life again. A year ago, I might have rejected her outright. But the past 12 months had taught me that holding on to anger was its own kind of prison. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, I told her honestly. But I'm willing to try to understand. That's all I can offer right now. It wasn't the reconciliation she'd hoped for, but it was something. A small opening where before there had been only a wall. We parted with no promises beyond a tentative agreement to meet again someday, when we were both ready. As I walked back to my office, I reflected on how much had changed. Not just my professional success or my father's downfall, but the fundamental shift in how I viewed myself and my worth. I was no longer Hazel Montgomery, disappointed daughter and family failure. I was simply Hazel, creative director, mentor to my team, valued for my talents and contributions rather than my surname. The path to this self-acceptance hadn't been easy. Months of therapy had helped me process the trauma of my family's rejection and understand the dynamics that had shaped our relationships. I'd learned to recognize the patterns of control and emotional manipulation that had seemed normal throughout my childhood, to set boundaries that protected my hard-won independence. Brooke remained my steadfast support, along with new friends I'd made at Nexus who knew and valued me for myself. I'd moved into my own apartment 6 months earlier, modest but comfortable, decorated with my own artwork and free from any financial ties to my former family. Rebecca had attempted to reconnect after Alex filed for divorce, suddenly positioning herself as a fellow victim of the Montgomery machine. I declined her overtures, recognizing them as the same opportunism that had led her to betray me before. Some relationships weren't worth salvaging, I'd learned, especially those built on convenience rather than genuine care. As I entered the Nexus building, Kyle greeted me in the lobby. How did it go with your mother? About as well as could be expected, I replied. We're not exactly reconciled, but we're talking. He nodded. Progress, then. That's all any of us can hope for. Kyle had become a mentor and friend over the past year, though we were careful to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. His own history with my father gave him unique insight into my situation, and his guidance had been invaluable as I navigated both my new leadership role and the complicated aftermath of the Montgomery scandal. The team's waiting for your final approval on the Westridge proposal, he reminded me, as we walked toward the elevator. They're nervous about presenting to the client tomorrow. I'll reassure them, I promised. The work is exceptional. They should be proud of it. This was my life now, leading creative projects, mentoring younger designers, building something positive instead of fighting against my father's negative influence. The constant struggle that had defined me for so long had given way to something more sustainable, more fulfilling. That evening, I celebrated my birthday quietly with friends. Not with an elaborate party designed to impress society, but with genuine conversation and laughter in Brooke's cozy apartment. No disownment papers awaited me this year. No cruel public humiliation orchestrated by my father. Instead, there were thoughtful gifts, heartfelt cards, and people who valued me for exactly who I was. As I blew out the candles on my cake, I made no wish for revenge or vindication. Those battles were behind me now. Instead, I wished for the strength to keep building this new life I'd created, free from the shadows of my past. Family, I'd learned, wasn't defined by blood or surnames or trust funds. It was defined by love, acceptance, and mutual respect. Things that couldn't be granted in legal documents or withdrawn in moments of anger. My father had given me disownment papers thinking he was taking everything from me, but in reality, he'd given me the push I needed to discover my own worth beyond the Montgomery name. Sometimes, I reflected, the greatest gift can come disguised as rejection. And sometimes the CEO who calls your name isn't offering you a job, he's offering you the chance to become the person you were always meant to be. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own dreams? Have you experienced rejection that ultimately led to growth? Share your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more real-life journeys of resilience, and hit that share button if you know someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the path to finding your true self begins when someone closes a door you were never meant to walk through.